pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next, we have any public comment? Hearing none, we are going to move on to the minutes. Minutes were in your packet for September 18, 2024.
Motion to approve is presented.
We have a motion.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are passed. I think we had an updated claims docket that came over.
Emailed it, and there's also one at your place setting. Nothing really out of the ordinary.
Your microphone.
Program admin expenses.
Your microphone.
There's nothing out of the ordinary program. It's expenses. This is the last invoice for waste management for the year. We have a community enhancement grant to the city of LaPorte for downtown holiday activities. That was approved at last month's meeting. There's a business grant, BlackRock Real Estate Services. They are at the corner of Michigan and Lincoln Way at 724 Lincoln Way. The company that actually applied for the grant was Manager Link, but BlackRock covered the cost of the installation of awnings, so the grant will be paid to them. The applicant of the grant, he signed a release asking that the grant be paid to BlackRock and not to him, since they incurred the cost. And then we have special grants. City of LaPorte, the downtown events management fee. Also, the comprehensive plan match, which was approved by the board in 2003. Labuznik Center for the Arts, our share of the Mucho Mas mural. And then the following ones are all from the Parks Department for renovations to the Scharf Fields restrooms, and that's for Big C Equiparts. Equiparts is a company that does fixtures and dividers in restrooms. Cableins, Menards, Rural King, and Sherwin-Williams. So we have a grand total of $101,064.63.
Motion to approve the claim docket as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on the claims? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Claims are approved. Let's move to financial statements. You should have those in your packet as well. I did have just a couple questions in regards to the financial statements, mainly for Mary Ann, I think, here. So we did the study, the connector, we're looking to pay that out as well?
I have nothing on file or no requests to pay that.
Can we follow up with Craig and just
Yes.
see where that's at? I'd like to get that off in this year. I would imagine we're pretty close. I think it's all been pretty much done, so. And the other thing on the income portion, I think you're double, it might be the formula in the financial statements, but you're doubling the income. So like if you go across the line item, I didn't have it with me, but I was looking at it prior. So rather than you have a budget item, and as you go across, as we receive income for either interest or incentives for each year, it's actually adding them, so at the very end, it's looking like it's almost doubling what your budgeted item is.
Okay, I'll double check
Yeah.
those formulas.
Yeah, so just take a look at that, and we can hammer that out. The other thing was, and I just talked to Julie about this a little bit, but we had one other grant for Tommy Veery's building downtown, and I think you just went through, so I was going to have you get an update on that, but maybe you could provide some insight on how it looks and status.
Yeah, I went through there today, and I'm very impressed with the progress. I know it's going to be a while before he's ready to rent those units out, but I believe he goes above and beyond in the work that he does, and I'm thrilled about what's going to be happening there. We need that, and I think it's going to look great for our downtown, and I'm just impressed with the work he does and the commitment he has to our community.
So we, obviously, everybody that either knows or doesn't know, the building that collapsed downtown, so that's the building we're talking about. So we have a grant outstanding for that. Maybe Mary Ann work with, maybe if Julie talks to Tommy. I think we need just to understand the timeline, and then I don't even remember, due to the fact of obviously the delay, how we were paying that out, but ultimately, how we want to fund that. Maybe we can work with him on that process as well, or go back to our original approval, sort of see how that was designed when we originally approved it, and then make sure that if he needs funding and that's part of this process. I couldn't remember if it was a completion and then we provide this, or how that outlined in the approval.
I don't remember, that was written,
So let's just try to, we'll investigate
year
that. And then
ago.
work with him, as obviously depending on the timeline and when he's going to be completed. He may need those funds at that time, so. All right, that answers that question. Any questions on the financial statements? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Financials are passed. Old business. I just wanted to take a minute to thank everybody for, we had sort of an interim approval via email vote for Dr. Zhang's building in the Newport Landing development. So that went very well, and appreciate the quick response on that. The timing was of the essence. So thank you for that. Pending items. I'm actually going to, Mary Ann, the special grant agreement for mortgage for Bar Holdings LLC. What was the follow-up on that one?
I have no update.
So they've been waiting on their state design release, which I understand just occurred. So I would expect, if you remember that particular project, we are funding through their lender, so they can take out their grant through their normal draw process. So I would expect that before our next meeting in November, that will be in a position to ask us to fund that again through their lender.
Okay, any questions on that? So open an investment account, Edward Jones, so we have reserves. I was looking into possible returns on investment accounts due to increase in interest rates over the last year and a half, 2 years. I did talk to John Salisbury with Edward Jones. They do have a money market account, which at the current time pays close to 5%, or actually a little over 5%. I don't know how the interest rate changes are going to affect that. But if it's something that, and we can talk about this more maybe at our planning session next month, but it would be paying probably 2% more than what we are getting now. I think we're at 3% with PNC Bank. We could also talk to them and see if there's anything they can do to help match that rate, so it's not an issue of moving any funds. But I don't think, it could be something to consider, on 2% on, $1 million+ at different differing times of the year could be significant in terms of interest returns for us. So we'll discuss that a little bit further. I'll talk to Mary Ann, we'll talk to PNC, see what they're willing to do, and then make a decision sometime next month, unless anybody has questions. So downtown murals process funding. So we met, Mary Ann and I, Janet Block with Lebesnick Center for the Arts, Craig Phillips, our city planner, and was there anybody else in that meeting that I'm thinking about, Mary Ann?
That was just it. There were 5 of
I
us.
was there.
Oh, Julie was there. And-
Sorry, Julie.
And both Mary Ann and I did not realize that Julie was in that meeting, but then she was going to sit out in the audience. It's one thing or another. So anyway, so we did have a meeting on Friday. I think our board discussed situations with a lot of requests for murals here recently. It's popular. Obviously, the one on the side of the LaPorte County Library building is a great work of art. The same artist did the mural on the side of Mucho Mas's building, which went up relatively quick. We've got a couple requests that have come to us, along with additional proposals for possible more murals next year. So with all of that excitement, we thought that there should be some type of process that at least we consider as we're looking at murals to grant funds. One, obviously, we need to establish a budget, so that's something that I'll probably bring to you folks next month. In the meantime, we did discuss with both Craig Phillips and Janet. Craig is going to go back within the planning department, develop some sort of application process for anybody looking to do a mural. So it just meets some minimal downtown, I shouldn't say minimal, meets downtown design standards, that there ultimately would be some advisory committee or some committee that would approve these murals, whether it be private entities or whether it be on public facilities. And then in the meantime, Janet Block is reaching out. She has other organizations that are interested in funding some of these, or possibly funding, whether it be a match situation. So that's some of the things we discussed. The main thing being sort of the process. So if we say, hey, we're going to award a grant for X amount of dollars for somebody to paint, that at least there's something that goes in. It's a reputable artist. It's not the same person, that it's going to have sustainability for the project, that it's not going to come off the wall in a year. So we want to make sure that, and the building owners approve, the surrounding building owners are comfortable with it. We're going to be more, I would assume we would be more of the granting entity, and then the process would be developed between that organization and the city of LaPorte. So that is where we sort of ended with that. But think about it as we go into next month's meeting in terms of like, hey, Janet's going to come back and say, hey, here's sort of what I'm thinking in terms of, we've got a couple projects that we think we can complete in 2025. We think the funding needs for those projects would be X. Would the UEA be able to support X amount of dollars toward those projects? And then she's going to provide that to me or Mary Ann ahead of time, and then we'll bring that to the planning session next month. Any questions on murals? Any comments that we need to relay?
So-
Julie, you have any comments on that meeting? Okay.
So for the, the meeting next month, I know we funded a few over this past year. Could we get like a total for the meeting next month as far as what we spent on that? Just to kind of give an idea when we look as far as setting up a budget.
Yep, we can do that. Speaking, new business, setting the date for the 2025 budget session. I think are we okay for the third week of, isn't that what we sort of set it at, Mary Ann?
We're looking at the 20th. That's the week before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is late this year.
Yes. So we would, it wouldn't be right before, it wouldn't be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
No.
So as long as, if everybody can look at their schedules for that, we
We're
would
looking
love
at November 20th.
November 20th. We would start around 3, or at 3. Our planning session would start from 3 to 4, or go from 3 to 4, And then basically the planning session is a review of the budget. And then we would have our meeting at 4 o'clock. It'd be probably a relatively short meeting due to the fact that we'll be discussing mostly the budget in that meeting. So if you have any problems, please let Mary Ann know in regards to that. So otherwise, we'll plan it on the normal business day. I did want to just add for setting the budget. So what the process for newer members has sort of been, I'm going to meet with Mary Ann probably, I think we have
We're
a
meeting
date set.
Thursday, a week from tomorrow.
Week from tomorrow. What we'll do is we'll go through the prior year's budget, maybe even a prior couple years' budget on what we've traditionally funded with any ideas or concepts that have come to us or come from you folks between now and then in terms of budget items we would like to consider. We'll throw them down on a piece of paper into a spreadsheet, come up with a basic sort of draft budget. We will send that out to you folks in advance of the meeting, so you will have time to review that. And then if you have any comments, that you can reach out to us and at least have some time to sort of digest it before we go into the meeting. I ask, as I always do, I know we get requests. I know Mary Ann, I know Julie's heavily involved. Bert and I get a lot of requests being in the organization that we're in on a regular basis for people who are interested in grants, funding for, buildings, property, murals, all those kind of things. So the biggest area of focus, I guess the one area of focus would probably be on the residential side. So keep your mind on that. I'm going to bring up something here in a minute, but that's where we always tend to fall short, the engagement from our residents. And we do a lot for the parks, which has been an area that we actually focused on over the last several years and made significant improvements to the parks that are in the zone. But if there's anything that you guys have in terms of ideas that you'd like to bring forth, try to get them to either Mary Ann or I ahead of time so we can at least throw them on the agenda for that meeting and we can sit down and discuss them. If it comes out, bubbles out a good idea that we want to all consider, then we can sort of develop a budget for it. Some things, and for example, some things that I've got hit here over the last several months, I just jotted a few down, so it's nothing that I'm throwing on the budget, but we'll probably discuss. Downtown alleyways has come up, so like redeveloping an alleyway is an example. That's more commercial, that could be residential in terms of upper story apartments. Planter, the planter removal, some of the planters obviously are getting hit. Ideally, I think the city would like to have those planters more, or less of the planters. Obviously, they become, some of the water piping and some of that stuff doesn't even work to water the plants, so now the bid's paying for those to be watered every year, as well as planting, so it's a huge expense. So I know they're trying to have alternatives for the planters, and some of the ideas were even removal, but it's like $7,000 or $8,000 to remove a planter. So even having a budget to maybe help remove those as the process goes down, as we look to redevelop the downtown, those are kind of things that we should consider. So I guess just ideas like that. I'll stop there. Does anybody have any comments or anything related to the planning session?
In regards to next month for the planning, did we get anything finalized with Jeff about the dumpster program for next year and kind of what?
Thank you for, it's a great segue to, I forgot that comment. So basically,
Jeff and I are working on it.
I had Mary Ann send out a request to some of the organizations we traditionally have funded in our budget. One would be Jeff, I shouldn't say Jeff, the code enforcement department, but basically seeing what they would like as a budget and how often, just a proposal. Same for the downtown events. Brett Versity with the Civic, who's basically traditionally run the downtown events rather than funding one event at a time. We made a budget for that. We told him to put a proposal together as well. And Mark Schreiber with the Parks Department, just mentioned the park funding that we've provided over the last several years. He was on that email as well to provide us with some insight if we were to approve funding, what kind of projects they would like to do for the coming year. So those three are addressed. Okay. Did you put a copy of that letter
Yes,
Okay.
it's at your place setting.
Mike, before you move on, just want to briefly mention, connected to the planning session, but not specifically, we're all aware of the project that we funded along Lincoln Way, the Carpenters Union building, which I think has made great progress. The building looks terrific. I know the second floor is finished at this point, but we're still working to find a restaurant that will be a good tenant in that space. We have been working hand in hand with the Carpenters Union. I think we've got a really good opportunity that we're trying to piece together at this point. It is something that I believe we will be in a position to maybe discuss at our planning session. So just so everyone here is aware, we've got progress there, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to look at an actual proposal and how a deal might come together here in the next 30 or 60 days at the worst.
Okay, so the letter that you have in front of you was a letter to Heather Ennis with the Northwest Indiana Forum in regards to the Ready Grant. So the city is applying for funding for some residential improvements. I think everybody might have heard, or if you haven't, the charrette that was done, funded by the Healthcare Fund, or Health Foundation of LaPorte, on the residential need, particularly in our downtown sort of triangle area, they call it down here, in this area, which includes some of the enterprise zone. So they're asking us, and I've got a sort of a form letter here for you to look at. And they're looking to get a letter of support from us for this projects, which would be significant amount of projects going through the downtown. I think the request is $20 million for housing. 10 million is the request, and then they're asking for, they've got other funding partners, which is not part of this letter, but ultimately asking the UEA for a $1 million commitment over 4 years to help in the completion of renovation projects. Some of what the discussion that I had with Craig was focused on the downtown area, the upper stories of the downtown, to make them more walkable for residents, provide more opportunities for the building owners to put residential spaces in the upper floors of those. As you get into some of the charrette area, it's not covered by the UEA, so everything that we would fund would have to be within the UEA boundaries, as traditionally done by our organization and our board. So I guess I'm throwing this out to you. I think in terms of the housing, this is a big push and a big initiative for our city of LaPorte. The funding, at least my thoughts on the funding are, we would have a grant coming off for the Rural King development over on the west side of town, which is $200,000 a year for 5 years. Our last payment is in 2025, so the beginning of 2025 we'll make that last installment. So basically, it would not affect our budget from the standpoint of how we currently operate. Obviously, we would be replacing this commitment with that commitment. This would be a little bit higher, $50,000 more over a shorter period of time. But I'm fully in support of this. I think it's something that if you give the okay, I would sign. Obviously, we'd have to look at our budget each year, but ultimately, it would be a commitment that we would make to fund that. So I'm going to stop, see if anybody has any opinions on this letter. I know it's just coming to you now. They were approached, and then I was approached about signing on this within the last handful of days here, and they need to get the request in by the end of this week. So if it's something you need to table for a couple days and talk about, but I would need to know relatively soon.
Would this money, I'm just being curious, who would it be paid to? The developer?
I think,
Or multiple developers?
do you want to? Yeah.
I don't think that information, I don't think the information is available at this time. There's many different ways it could be structured, but the Ready award involves a number of different projects that will likely bring in a number of different structures as well. I think there's probably a significant amount of flexibility of of the UEA's opinions on that. Frankly, like thinking out loud here, some of the projects that we've funded recently, most recently the bar holdings that we discussed, frankly, that's exactly in line with this initiative. So even though that is not connected to Ready, it's not something we funded knowing there was going to be a Ready award, that would be the type of project that would also marry or mesh with the city's strategy in the downtown area. So for me, it almost seems like this is work that we're already doing. It's just a matter of using a structure that will work hand in hand with the city's plan for their Ready funds and other residential projects.
Yeah, just to parlay on that, I think what Bert's ultimately saying is it's going to be a collaboration. We're sort of doing it now with like the 7 units he discussed, but I think ultimately it's going to be a collaboration, which is going to put our money parlayed with other money, and hopefully a grant that's awarded. Now, granted, we have to get the grant as part of this as well, so then the logistics will probably follow with that, and the board will be made fully aware of all of that. Obviously, we'd be committing to say, hey, if this project were to move forward, we still need to be able to approve the process, right? So they're gonna have to develop how this is all going to get implemented, and then we'll have still there. We're just saying that we are in support. We will be willing to commit based on the criteria that you guys set, that the city sets for. So the city would be heavily involved in it. So the details
The devil is in the details.
are still to come, yes. Any comments?
The idea that we're leveraging, although I think we've made great progress and accomplished a ton in the UEA, but the idea of taking the investments we're already making and leveraging that, by another, I guess, minimum of 10 million, but more likely 20 million is obviously very attractive from my perspective.
So I'm looking for, in a nutshell, I'm looking for an approval or a motion for an approval for me to write a letter of support, and that we would be, as long as everything comes to fruition, these funds that they are saying that they're going to request that they actually get, that we would come in to support it at that level.
Is this a tentative commitment to that, or is it,
It's a tentative commitment to that.
but it
yes.
isn't encumbering anything at this point?
No, because we don't even know. what
I
they're
would be interested in the definition of the word all in all income levels, because that's a superlative that I don't take to be an honest one, because it won't be all income levels. I'd be interested in what they're looking at there.
And I'm not heavily involved, and we can have Craig provide some of them details.
It would be interesting to know exactly where they're focusing that money.
But they are looking at, in our discussion in the meeting we
Our
had.
part would be it, yeah.
We're all income levels, looking at specifically like how they would implement it, like, I'm not gonna say Section 8 housing, but
A piece of it, Ryan, is a big piece of the matching funding is Health Foundation support, which is obviously more heavily focused on affordable housing. So while I do think there is going to be products that will kind of span the spectrum, I think it's more heavily focused on the affordable side than the market rate side. But again, you go back to, some of that is project specific, so depending on which projects are pushed forward, I think that will also impact the bottom line pricing.
yeah. And we're gonna get more specifics. You guys, it's up to you whether you want to support this or not. Ultimately, if this project had moved forward, I'm sure we're going to get a request for funding for these projects as well. It's just that whether we want to be a part of this process, and it could be it could be supportive in terms of how they look at the Ready Grant as well, whether they get the full amount, whether the UEA is going to support those funds or not.
Essentially, this would be turning $1 million over to other people's decision-making, or will we be deciding grant by grant?
We would always decide grant by grant. I mean, we're saying, hey, we're going to commit to this, but ultimately, the people that we're committing to would be the city of LaPorte and that project, and that they've got to meet certain criteria before we say, hey, I mean, because all of a sudden the metrics change, then we have, as a board, have to be good stewards of our funds, right? So we can say, hey, you know, what you presented with us, because we don't even have the details.
I would be really interested in the projected impact, too.
Yeah.
Are we talking about, you know, if we could get 6 more units, that'd be great, because I would not be nearly as excited about that. But if they're, hey, you're going to have 75 new neighbors moving in, well, that's a little bit more, I don't know, enticing.
I mean, and I don't know if
It's a lot
there's.
of money, that's all.
Well, and I don't know if there's a way to phrase it, but maybe it's something we would be, maybe, I'll talk to Craig, but maybe if we want to approve it, and I just change the 1 million to financial support, you know, maybe it's to be determined. I mean, you know, however we do it, I think a letter would still go a long way. I don't know how that phrasing would look. I mean, he's the one that's writing the grant, so I'm open. If I don't hear a motion, I guess it's not going to be approved either way, but
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second.
as is,
For you to approve, for you to write the letter, correct? And with the 1 million, yeah.
okay, all right,
To do it as is.
as is, okay. Did somebody second it?
I seconded it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion is passed. And I'll bring information as I get it, as more information comes to light. Okay. Bert answered my last one, so any other business to discuss? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Just make note that Julie was at the meeting today, Mary Ann, if you could. Thank you. We are adjourned.